Hey guys, I thought I would come to you tonight in my pajamas with my snuggly cat that I sleep with. Not really. And share with you one of my favorite all-time bedtime stories, Sleeping Beauty. Now, if you're anything like me, you like to have a good bedtime story. So I thought it would be nice to read a bedtime story with you. All right, Sleeping Beauty. A long time ago, and far away, there lived a king and a queen. They were very happy, for their first child, a girl, had been born. "We must have a grand christening for her," said the king, who was delighted to have a daughter. "We must invite all the fairies of the kingdom to bless her," said the queen. "How many are there now?" asked the king. 12 or 13, said the wife. "Send the invitations. We'll find out soon." There were 12 fairies, and they were all sent invitations. A 13th fairy had not been heard for so long that it was presumed that she was dead. No invitation was sent. The day of the christening was sunny and bright. The princess was named Briar Rose, and the fairies began to give their gifts. "She shall be beautiful," said the first. "She shall be wise," said the second. "She shall be good," said the third. "She shall be kind," said the fourth. The gifts continued in this way, wishing that was for Briar Rose. 11 of the 12 fairies had given their gifts when the room suddenly went dark. After a great flash of light, a small dark figure stood in front of the king and queen. It was the 13th fairy. "Why wasn't I invited to the christening?" she screamed. She was furious at being left out. All the fairies in the kingdom had given their blessings. "Well, here's mine for the princess. On her 16th birthday, she will prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die." Another flash of light, and the fairy was gone. "But we thought she was dead," said the king. "What can we do?" The queen was in tears. The 12 fairies stepped forward. "There is still my gift for Briar Rose," she said. "The fairy's curse cannot be undone, but I can change it a little. She will prick her finger, but instead of dying, she will fall into a deep sleep that will last for 100 years. There was a great hubbub in the hall, and everyone discussed the events. The following day, the king issued a proclamation ordering that all spinning wheels and spindles were to be destroyed. Throughout the land, there were great fires as the spinning wheels were burned. Over the years, the princess grew into a lovely girl. All who met her were enchanted by her. Eventually, the bad fairy's wishes were forgotten. All spinning wheels and spindles had been destroyed, so there was no reminder, and the fairy was not heard of again. And so, on Briar Rose's 16th birthday, the king and queen were due to arrive back from a faraway visit. There was to be a large birthday party for the princess. Briar Rose was wandering around the palace, and everyone was preparing for the party so she could please herself where she went. As there were still parts of the palace that had never stepped foot in, she decided to go exploring. "I wonder what is in the great South Tower," she said. All of the servants and courtiers wished her a happy birthday as she made her way across the palace. That part of the palace was very old, and there were very few people there. The base of the tower was in a corridor. The entrance of the small, very solid-looking door. The key was on the outside. "It's very stiff," said the princess, and she turned the key. There! It's open! Stairs led up to the tower in front of her. She began to climb them. Meanwhile, her parents had arrived back at the palace. "Has everyone seen the princess?" asked the king. "Today is her 16th birthday, the day when the curse may fall. Somebody must know where she is." Nearly everyone had seen her, but nobody knew where she had been going. "She must be found," said the queen. "If the prophecy is to come true, today is the day." A search of the palace and the grounds began. Meanwhile, the princess had reached the top of the tower where there was another door. This time, there was no key, and the door was slightly open. "There must be a wonderful view of the rest of the palace and grounds from the window," said the princess. Then she heard a strange whirring sound. It was unlike anything she had ever heard before. She pushed the door open and went into the room. There in the middle sat an old woman working at a spinning wheel. Behind her was an enormous bed. The wheel began making the noise. "What are you doing?" asked Briar Rose. "I have never seen one of those before. What is it?" "It is a spinning wheel," said the old woman. "Would you like to try it, my dear?" "Oh, may I?" asked Briar Rose. She sat on the stool in front of the wheel, and the wheel whirled around. As soon as she touched the spindle, she pricked her finger. She fell to the floor in a deep sleep. The old woman, who was really the 13th fairy in disguise, picked her up and laid her on the bed. At that moment, all over the palace, people began to fall asleep. The cooks were preparing for the party, fell asleep over the stirring and tasting. The scullery maids fell asleep over the washing. The laundry maid fell asleep over her washing. The chambermaids fell asleep while they dusted, polished, and prepared for the party. The king and queen, the courtiers, and the guests fell asleep in the great hall. The guards fell asleep at their post. The search parties looking for the princess fell asleep while they searched in the gardens, in the corridors, in the spare rooms, and some of the oldest parts of the palace. Even the flies fell asleep on the stable walls. The birds and the butterflies fell asleep in the palace gardens. So did the wild rabbits that raided the palace vegetable gardens. The gardeners and their helpers were so busy chasing off the rabbits they fell asleep in the mid-chase. And the hearths and fires died down, and the meat stopped cooking. The kitchen maid stopped plucking the chicken, and the entire palace fell asleep, along with the princess. A hedge of briar roses sprang up around the palace, protecting it from the outside world. Years passed, and from the time to time the king's son would come to the famous briar hedge to try to find the mysterious sleeping princess that legends had spoke of. But none got through. The hedge was too strong, and the princes were cut to bits. 100 years passed, and the tale of the Sleeping Beauty, as the princess was known, became a great legend. Very few people believed she existed. He went through into the palace grounds, walking past the sleeping rabbits, birds and butterflies, and the gardeners at their work. The kitchens were full of cooks and maids who hadn't moved for over 100 years. They were all fast asleep. Even the king and queen were seated at a table in the great hall, were sleeping soundly. The prince walked through the palace, making his way to the tallest tower, where he climbed the stairs and entered the tower. There on the bed he saw Briar Rose fast asleep. "She is so lovely," he said. He had fallen completely in love with her. "How can I wake her?" He leaned over and gently kissed her. Briar Rose's eyelids flickered as she woke up. The first person she saw was the prince, and she fell in love with him. Together they walked down the great hall. The king and queen were just waking up, and the princess and Briar Rose entered. The cooks in the kitchen woke up to carry on preparing the food, and the chambermaids carried on their work. The party was still to be held, but it was an engagement party instead of a birthday party. The prince and Briar Rose were to be married. The hedge disappeared, and the village saw the palace again and realized the legend had been true. The bad fairy was never heard of again. The end. Sleeping Beauty. I hope you have a great night's rest. Good night.